I hope you're ready for another new Mini variant, because here comes one now, and here it is. It's called the Aceman, and it sits in the range above the Cooper and below the Countryman. In fact, it replaces the old Clubman model. Now, in size, it's probably closest to the 5-door Cooper. So the question is, why do you need a 5-door Cooper and an Aceman? Well, the reality is that the Cooper is petrol engine only, but this thing is electric, baby. Now, you might think that an electric 5-door large Mini is about as feasible as reality TV. But stay with me, because there's a little bit to this thing. Let's start with what you get and what you pay. Mini is offering the Aceman in 2 grades right now, with a flagship grade called JCW coming soon, which we haven't yet sampled. So for now, there's the base model E and SE, although it's worth mentioning that the E will only be around until stocks are exhausted and won't be continued beyond that. But Mini reckons it has stocks of the E to last the rest of this year, so if it sounds right for you, don't mess about. Starting with that model, the Aceman E carries a $51,990 price tag, which gets you plenty of standard gear, including a sunroof, adaptive cruise control, augmented reality navigation, head-up display, heated front seats, a decent stereo, 19-inch alloy wheels, and full connectivity. The SE at $60,990 brings a different wheel design, sportier front seats with electric adjustment, a stereo upgrade, different upholstery and tinted glass. If that sounds like a lot of money for the extra gear, the real step up the SE takes is to fit a more powerful electric motor and a larger battery pack for more performance and more range. For the full details, check out the written review at carsguide.com.au. The Mini's trump card against its competition is its retro feel-good vibe that, if you believe the PR, harks right back to a time when mini skirts and the original Mini car were still novelties. The broad idea has been to tap into that rich vein of nostalgia and offer up a car that does all the things a modern compact SUV can do, but with a good old days flavour. And to be honest, it works here just as well as it did when the first born-again BMW built Mini hit showrooms at the very start of this century. The obvious echoes of past design include the overall roof design with its upright pillars and the bullnose styling at the front. Inside, the large central information binnacle is now an OLED screen, and the switchgear that runs below it gives off a faint whiff of the original Mini's row of toggle switches. To be honest, it looks better than it sounds. The base model Aceman gets a 135 kilowatt, 290 Newton meter electric motor, while the more expensive SE gets 160 kilowatts and 330 Newton meters. It's not just a bigger engine either, there's also more battery capacity in the SE. But either way, the way the car's laid out is a case of Mini tradition meets EV efficiency. Now, all this stuff in here that looks like an engine, it isn't. The motor for this car is mounted down low and it drives the front wheels directly. The batteries are under the boot. That's pretty standard EV convention. So all this stuff that looks like a little micro-industrial city is actually computers and electronics designed to run the whole thing. EVs are supposed to be simple, and in a macro sense they are, but at this level, they're quite complex things. So there's not a lot to see in here of any real interest, and there's no luggage space. So let's go inside. It's probably inside the Mini where it's actually most retro. The pleated trim on the seats is very 60s, 70s. I love the fact that it's got this big center stack here, which is a OLED screen now, where in the old days it was just a speedo and a fuel gauge. But everywhere else you look, the vertical pillars, or quite upright pillars, are taking me right back to the original Mini. But in another sense, it's actually a very modern car, because Mini is very concerned about the environment, so they tell me, and therefore this car has a smaller environmental footprint as it can possibly have, which means all this interior trim is made from recycled plastics and polyesters and probably drink bottles, I don't know. There's no chrome and there's no leather, because the chrome and leather process are both pretty harmful to the environment. And even the wheels on this car, the alloy wheels, are made from 70% recycled aluminium. So you can sleep easy, the Mini's gone green. Because it doesn't matter how green a car is, if it's not big enough inside for what you need, then it's not much good to you. To be honest, the front seats in this car are spacious enough for a big guy like me, but if I was driving, you would not get the same size bloke behind me in the back seat. There's just not enough foot or leg room, and I find the door openings on this car are quite small. And maybe that's because it's scrunched up a little bit in the wheelbase, I don't really know, but there are other cars that seem to be easier to get in and out of that aren't any bigger than this. So I'm not sure what's going on there. The other thing I'd say in a practicality sense is that this car has a very thick B-pillar right here, and when you sit in my normal driving position, when I try and turn right, I'm looking at the B pillar. I have to sort of crane my neck to see around it. And even then it's very thick, so it's actually an inbuilt blind spot. It's something to keep in mind. The born-again Mini also has to work as a small SUV in the real world, and this is maybe where nostalgia meets practicality and things take unexpected turns. The first of those is the switchgear below the centre screen. In the old Mini, this area was home to a row of toggle switches. Now though, it's home to the starter button and gear selector, but they're a bit small and they're black on black, which can be hard to see. The boot is better than you might expect, with a lower floor than many EVs. With the rear seat folded, there's lots of room, more than 1,000 litres for instance, and even with the rear seat in place, the luggage space is totally adequate. The full details are in the written review at carsguide.com.au. The less powerful motor of the E model means it should be a bit more frugal in terms of its power consumption. So, the official consumption number of 14 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometres, teamed with its battery size, gives a theoretical range of 310 kilometres. The SE claims a consumption number of a slightly higher 14.4 kilowatts, but its larger battery offsets that and gives it a calculated range of 406 kilometres. In real world use, particularly freeway work, you're unlikely to match that, but the numbers, which are based on WLTP testing, do serve as a basis for comparison. Both Acemans can use commercial fast chargers. The E capable of topping up at a maximum of 75 kilowatts and the SE at 95 kilowatts. That should take them from 10 to 80% charged in 28 minutes and 31 minutes respectively. Charging on an 11 kilowatt DC charger will see the E go from discharged to fully charged in 4 hours and 15 minutes and the SE in 5.5 hours. For DC charging, the Mini uses a CCS Type 2 cable. But so much for the numbers. What's it like to drive? Beyond that, driving the Mini is actually pretty good fun. I mean, that's the whole point of the car. Mini tells us it's got go-kart-like handling, and to a certain extent it has, provided you're prepared to accept that your go-kart's 4 and a bit metres long and weighs 1,600 kilos. That's hardly a criticism, that's how EVs are. And the way they've done this car, the way they've set it up on the suspension that it's got, it does actually feel pretty lively and pretty perky. It's got great steering too, good feel. It's one of the better electrically assisted power steering systems I've sampled in a long time. Does it go? Yeah, it does. It really does. With 160 kilowatts and lots of torque right off the mark, it really gets going. My only concern there is it's got this crazy, goofy Jetson soundtrack instead of an engine note, but you can turn that off, and I have, trust me. The only thing that makes me wonder a little bit about the car is that it actually feels very long, as if I'm sitting in the middle of it rather than in the front half of it. In the old Mini and cars like it, it felt like your toes could brush the back of the number plate at the front of the car. You felt like you were right on that front axle, and this car's a little bit more remote. I feel like I'm sitting a lot further back. There's also a bit of road noise, and I reckon that could be tyres, but it could also be a bit of suspension noise coming through too. Certainly it's not as silent in here as a car like this, as you expect an EV to be. But then again, this is more than just an EV. It's all about a lifestyle, and I guess a little bit of noise isn't going to hurt anybody. Plenty of driver assistance programs come standard in the Mini, including autonomous emergency braking, cornering brake control, blind spot warning, rear collision protection, lane keeping assistant, rear cross traffic warning, attentiveness assistant, and a tyre pressure monitoring system. It's nice to see that the calibration of things like the lane keeping program is relatively subtle and won't automatically have you searching for the off button to switch it off. In the worst case scenario, the Mini has dual and side airbags, curtain airbags for every outboard passenger, and a centre airbag to prevent head clashes in a side impact. Again, the written review at carsguide.com.au has the full details. The Mini hasn't been locally crash tested, but did score 5 stars for safety in European NCAP testing. A 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty is nothing special these days, but is still pretty good in terms of prestige brands. Mini also provides 8 years and 100,000 kilometres of cover for the high voltage battery. Like its BMW parent company, Mini doesn't specify strict service intervals for the Aceman. Instead, the onboard computer monitors the car's use and then determines when a service is necessary. Optional cap price servicing works out at $1,371 for the first 4 years. Where and when you charge will be the big determining factors in how much a Mini Aceman costs to run. Charging from home with solar panels will always be cheaper than commercial charging stations. It's good fun to drive, it's well built, it's well equipped, it's safe, it's efficient, it goes very well, and it looks funky. But of course, they're things you expect of a car in 2025, right? Especially at this price point. But what makes cars like this stand out from the crowd just a fraction is the fact that when you drive this home and put it in your driveway for the first time, your neighbours are going to lean over the fence and go, oh, look at that, I want one of those. And that's what makes cars like the Mini Aceman just a little bit special.